This is our presentation on the juvenile justice system by Vanessa Brangard, Madison King, Kimberly Paxton, and Celeste Sala. A little bit of history about the juvenile justice system is a separate juvenile justice system was established in the United States about 100 years ago with the goal of diverting youthful offenders from the destructive punishments of criminal courts and encouraging rehabilitation based on the individual juvenile's needs. The first juvenile court was established in 1899 in Cook County, Illinois, due to the influx of immigrants to the United States in the 19th century. It was thought that the urban youth and children of immigrants were more prone to deviant behavior. The state thought it was their responsibility to take on the role of a parent when necessary to intervene with these bad behaviors. There are two principles that influence the United States juvenile justice system, one being parens patriae, which means parent of the country, that protects the state's right to officially intervene in the juvenile's life, especially if the youth was neglected. Under this principle, the state has the power to intervene in cases if the child has not reached full legal capacity. The second principle is in loco parentis, which means in place of the parents, which is an individual's or organization's assumption of the parental status for a child. The legal doctrine by which an individual or organization assumes the rights, duties, and obligations of a parent. There are a couple key court rulings regarding juvenile justice, which has made the system what it is today. The first is in Regal, 1967, which is a Supreme Court rules that the juvenile offenders are entitled to the same due process as adult offenders, including the right to timely notification of charges, the right to confront witnesses, the right against self-incrimination, and the right to counsel. Another one is Flores v. Reno and the Flores settlement in 1985 and 1997. This challenges the process of detention, treatment, and release of children, as well as the conditions of facilities where children are held. After more than a decade in court, about 10 years, the US government agrees in the 1997 Flores settlement to set standards for immigration detention centers where children are held to release children from immigration detention centers without unnecessary delay, and if suitable placement is not immediately available, to place children in the least restrictive setting appropriate to their age and any special needs. Two more key rulings are the Agreement to End Juvenile Life Without Parole in 1990, which states that no child should be subjected to torture or other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. The Human Rights Treaty also rules that neither capital punishment nor life imprisonment without the possibility of parole should be allowed for anyone under the age of 18. The United States is the only country in the world that permits youth to be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. In Roper v. Simmons, 2005, the Supreme Court outlaws the death penalty for juveniles, deeming it a disproportionate punishment. The court takes into account youth immaturity, diminishing their culpability or responsibility for their actions, and recognizing youth susceptibility to outside pressures and influences. A couple primary goals of the juvenile justice system include skill development, addressing treatment needs, habituation, successful reintegration of youth into the community, rehabilitation, and the juvenile justice system takes more of a restorative approach than the adult system, as well as it seeks to avoid incarceration whenever possible. A key concept of juvenile justice is the idea that children and youth are not innately violent or cruel. There exists a firm belief that youth can and will lead healthy and constructive lives if given the opportunity to grow instead of being presumed irredeemable and segregated from their communities. Recidivism rates from juveniles to adults. Well, there are a number of minors who get convicted of a crime, serve their time, and then later end up convicted and incarcerated again for another offense. It's kind of like the revolving door effect. Combating juvenile recidivism is a challenge in the criminal justice system and involves a focus on the cause of juvenile criminal activity and providing juveniles the services they need to permanently leave crime behind. Juveniles are far more likely than adults to commit another offense after release from incarceration. As far as the statistics on recidivism, the national juvenile recidivism rates are not available nationwide, but state studies are. The multiple agencies responsible for helping youth reintegrate into their communities often use disparate data systems and different terminology and often do not share information with one another. The highest juvenile recidivism rates were 76% within 3 years and 84% within 5 years. A study by Joseph Doyle, a researcher at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, found that 40% of juvenile offenders ended up in adult prison for crimes committed by the time they reached the age of 25. A review of state studies show rearrest rates for youth within 1 year of release averaged 55%, while incarceration rates and reconfinement rates averaged 24%. Causes of recidivism include incarcerated juveniles are more likely to meet other criminals, such as drug dealers, that require them to behave in a highly aggressive manner to avoid assault in prison. Incarceration interferes with a person's ability to get a job because of the criminal record and because time in prison keeps them away from employment and the ability to gain skills used for life. Incarceration can exacerbate existing mental health issues, and a significant portion of incarcerated people have a mental health condition already. Many juvenile offenders are in the child welfare system and show a higher rate of recidivism. High recidivism rates can be related to inconsistent program approaches, lack of program continuity when juveniles are transitioning from confinement to aftercare, and lack of support systems within family as well as schooling. The labeling theory and recidivism relate to one another in the fact that having previous experience of imprisonment can lead to more involvement in legal issues in the future. Labeling theory may predict that the receipt of a felony label could increase the likelihood of recidivism. Labeling effects are stronger for women, whites, and those who reach the age of 30 years without a prior conviction. And it increases juvenile sense of alienation from regular society and can further fuel deviant behaviors.
Why do juveniles commit crimes? The causes of juvenile delinquency are multifaceted, originating in both the social and psychological environments in which these young people develop. Poor self-esteem, a lack of attention at school and at home may all play a role in why young people turn to crime. Children from dysfunctional households also have a higher risk of engaging in criminal behavior. Every year, more and more young people fall victim to criminal activity because of things like peer pressure and drug usage. At what age do juveniles commit crimes? Different ages and genders are associated with different causes of juvenile delinquency. Younger children are more prone to engage in criminal activity due to curiosity or boredom, whereas older children and teens commit crimes in order to obtain social standing among their peers. The earlier a youth enters the juvenile justice system, the more likely they will become a violent offender. This slide shows the outline of age, gender, and incarceration rate by race. And as you can see, 16 plus is the higher for the age. Males are usually higher than females for their rate of criminal activity. And incarceration rate by race shows that the African American is the highest and Asian has the lowest rate. What types of delinquency do juveniles start out doing? Delinquent behaviors such as stealing or skipping class are frequently the first step for those youth who go on to conduct more serious crimes. Theft of property, vandalism, and even violence and murder are all possible outcomes of these kinds of actions. What happens after a juvenile is arrested? Whenever a juvenile is arrested for an act of juvenile delinquency, he must immediately be advised of his legal rights. Youth coming into the justice system, usually after an arrest by law enforcement, are screened and assessed by various organizations and individuals. The charges against them are reviewed for legal significance, and a formalized court process may be used to establish their culpable commission of a criminal act. Before any court processes come into play, a juvenile must be referred to the court. Referral can be made by the police, parents, school, social service agencies, probation officers, or victims. How are juveniles tried and punished? The legal significancy of the case is determined during the first stage, as well as the case is better resolved informally through diversion to a program or a specified set of conditions without formal adjudication. A decision is also made whether to continue detention for those youth brought into custody. The detention decision is reviewed by a judge, and a hearing is also referred to as an arraignment, a pretrial hearing, or a plea hearing. An adjudication hearing will be made that may result in the youth being found to have committed the delinquent act, in which case a deposition hearing will be scheduled. The dispositional hearing is similar to the sentencing hearing in the criminal court. A judge can decide on probation, placement in a foster home, institutionalization, or some other alternatives for the youth offender, such as referral to a treatment program, imposition of a fine, community service, or restitution. A judge will sometimes ask the probation department for a predisposition report. The report contains information concerning the juvenile's family background, the facts surrounding the act, the interviews with social workers, teachers, and other important figures in the juvenile's life. Probation is the most common disposition for youth who receive a juvenile court sanction. A juvenile detention facility is usually the destination when a minor gets apprehended. They will wait for their trial date there. The juvenile may be detained until their trial, depending on the seriousness of the crime. The minor will have legal representation at the trial. The juvenile will be given the chance to submit their defenses before the prosecutor presents evidence against them. The judge then will announce his decision. The juvenile may get a fine, probation, or community service if proven guilty. The juvenile may be condemned to a juvenile prison facility for more serious crimes. It is significant to remember that there are several ways in which juvenile courts differ from adult courts. For instance, juvenile courts are frequently less formal and place more of an emphasis on rehabilitation than punishment. Execution of offenders under the age of 18 are prohibited. As Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote, minors cannot fully comprehend the consequences of their actions. The two main justifications for the death penalty, retribution and deterrence, do not work with juvenile wrongdoers.
When does a juvenile get charged as an adult? There are 5 different types of legal provisions under which children can be tried as adults, and many states have about a combination of 2 of them. The first one is a waiver or transfer, which means the judge has discretion to transfer any case to an adult court. This has different factors too. So like the prosecutor can request that the case could be transferred, and then the judge gets to decide if he wants to grant that request. And then there's some factors that affect the judge's decision, such as the seriousness of the offense, which is anything that if the child caused harm to another person, that affects. He looks at things like that. He looks at previous juvenile records, and then whether the juvenile would be susceptible to treatment. And then there's statutory or legislative exclusion, which some states require that certain crimes be charged in adult court. This is anything that is originally offenses punishable by death or life in prison. So anything like homicide, any serious crimes causing harm to another, those are all things that could be charged in adult court. And then there's a concurrent jurisdiction. This is only in a few states. Once again, it says with certain crimes, both juvenile and adult court have jurisdiction. So then the prosecutor would get to decide whether or not he wanted to apply to be in adult court or be tried in juvenile court. Then there's a reverse transfer. This allows the juvenile defendant to petition the court to transfer the case back to juvenile court. And then there's something called a blended sentencing system. This blends adult and juvenile sentencing options. So if the juvenile ends up being tried in adult court, they could still send him to a juvenile facility rather than an adult facility. And then there are some advantages and disadvantages. Now these vary depending on who you talk to, because obviously everybody has different opinions, but a couple that I found while researching was that in advantages, their record will not be expunged. So it keeps that record of any past crimes just for future to employers look back on, anything like that. And then there's fewer opportunities for the juveniles who committed serious crimes to reoffend. Most of the time, if they're tried as an adult, the punishment will be longer or more severe, so it's less likely that they will get out. And then the disadvantages are that their juveniles are subject to adult penalties, so anything that, is too rough for children. There's fewer opportunities in rehabilitation in adult courts. Not as many programs would be offered to help rehabilitate, and since juvenile justice is so important on that. And then the adult sentences cause juveniles to have a higher recidivism rate. Any child who was charged in an adult way, they are 2 times more likely to go back to jail or prison after the original sentence was up. And then for the deterrence of juveniles, and they're similar to adults, but they're not exactly the same. So they have a general deterrence, which is where the youths refrain from breaking the law in fear of being punished. So this is basically just your general idea of deterrence. And then there's a more specific deterrence where juvenile offenders are caught and punished once, and then in result, they refrain from committing future crimes just in kind of the fear of additional punishment. And then there's in-school programs offered to prevent youth from committing crimes. So like it's kind of an idea of the more time they spend in school or the more time they spend involved in sports, there's less opportunity for them to engage in any criminal activity. And then there's community programs that focus on skill building and productive distraction for youth. So if they have negative influences at home, it's easier for them to get out and maybe like a older brother or sister program like they do. That's a good program that works for them. And then there's family-based programs such as family therapy or parent training programs for any juvenile who has some issues at home that's maybe leading them to commit crimes or anything. And then lastly, there's the rehabilitation of juveniles. So there's 2 steps to juvenile rehabilitation, kind of. As previously stated, the juvenile justice system does focus more on rehabilitation rather than punishment. And then when the child would be accused of a crime, they're considered a delinquent or in need of supervision. The court will then decide what services the child needs to be rehabilitated and whether the child needs to be contained during that process. And then there are different types of rehabilitation programs. So there's drug treatment programs. These are things that consist of completing drug treatments, complying with and passing random drug tests, or attending meetings, and then like completing inpatient and outpatient treatments. And then there's education programs, which allows the juvenile offender to obtain a GED or a diploma. Then there's some facilities that even allow them to earn college credits, and then it just shows the youth that there's more options to life than a life of crime. And then they have vocational training programs. They're like apprenticeship training for the youth. So it provides work opportunities once they get out into the world. And then once again, they have like counseling programs. So it addresses any concerns and why the youth would be acting out. Any type of conflict resolution would be addressed, as well as any possible mental illnesses that would be causing it, so like depression or anything like that.
So foster care's contribution to the juvenile delinquency. Under statistics, there's on average 437,500 kids that are in the foster care system that are likely to be incarcerated for a crime. About 1/4 of those children will be involved with the juvenile justice system within a year of leaving foster care. Foster care children tend to be incarcerated for small infractions. Typically, they commit small theft, stealing a candy bar from a convenience store, and it makes them end up in the system. When it comes to foster homes and group homes, police tend to get called by those who are said to protect the children in their care because foster parents tend to be afraid of the children that they are caring for, and the police are called to deal with situations that they really have no business being involved in. Race plays a big role in children in foster care getting in trouble. African Americans and Asians tend to be more in trouble when in foster care than white people. Children that went through the foster care system are at a higher rate of being diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, and antisocial personality disorder. In group homes, youth are also 2.5 times more likely to end up in the juvenile justice system than youth that are in group homes or in foster homes. Children who bounce around from home to home and don't have a stable living life are at a higher risk of ending up in the juvenile justice system. About 90% of these children that bounce from home to home more than 5 times will end up in the system. Group homes lack a lot of problems for children. They lack guidance for children, helping them transition emotionally, physically, mentally. People that run group homes fail to check in on the kids and make sure that they are okay and not having harmful thoughts or thoughts of committing crimes. There also tends to be a lot of abuse by staff in group homes, mainly because they just think that's the only way to control the kids. The staff also tend to talk down to kids. There's also a lot of children that just think that group homes and foster homes are just a place to sleep. So they think that it's okay to just go about what they're doing crime-wise and don't think about the repercussions of it later. When it comes to the court systems and Congress, a juvenile court judge once said that foster care is a stepping stone for kids into committing crimes. From his time as a judge, he said that he saw a lot more kids coming through from the foster care system into the juvenile justice system than he did with just regular kids who are living in a stable home environment. The Juvenile Justice Prevention Act supports state and local efforts to prevent delinquency and helps to improve the juvenile justice system. The Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act tends to provide federal funding and guidance to the United States to support the prevention, assessment, prosecution, and treatment activities for youth. The child welfare system plays a big role in juvenile delinquency. Children tend to feel no connection to foster parents, which causes a lot more mental problems with children and pushes them more towards the life of crime. Children in the system also feel like they have nothing else to lose. And in that case, they think that getting in trouble for committing crimes is no big deal anymore. They think it's okay to do that. And for many foster parents, fostering children is just another source of making money. They don't really care. Travis Harishi has a theory on social bonding, and his theory focuses on understanding the causes of juvenile delinquency. And it said that children bond with others based on 4 factors. The first factor is attachment. It means that they act on impulse and don't have any connections to anyone, so it doesn't matter what they think when they are committing crimes. The next one's commitment. It's people, children in the system can't make long-term relationships, so they're not committing to the families that are looking out for them and caring for them. Involvement. There's a lack of people in their corner supporting them and caring for them, so they just have trouble trusting anybody in their lives. The last part of the theory on social bonding is belief. They think they deserve how their life has turned out and that there's no way to make it better. They just feel like they're just disposable. The amount of juvenile delinquency in the US. In 1997, 2.7 million children under 18 years old were arrested for crimes. In 2019, that same 2.7 million, when that number increased by 74%. Between 1997 and 2019, the number of youth detained in residential placements decreased by 50%. So we did see a decrease in the amount of children being taken out of their homes and put into other homes during this time. And there's about 423,077 juvenile cases that are adjudicated or disposed of in any given year. One positive aspect with the juvenile justice system is that the amount of female youth has remained at a steady level and hasn't had any drastic increases over the recent years. The male and female arrest rates have decreased at about the same percentage over the last 20 years. Girls are also less likely to be adjudicated, petitioned, detained, or placed into an out-of-home treatment center for their delinquent offenses. And for every 100,000 non-Hispanic Black juveniles, 315 of them end up in a residential placement facility. And then we just have the references that we used to find our information to provide for you guys today.